Hey, folks. Leo Olderpold. Figured I hadn't brought a video for a little while, so this is just by way of a bit of an update and a bit of a story, really. I've been doing some truck driving work recently to supplement the business that I run myself while I'm still building it, still garnering clients and getting work together and things like that. So I have enough coming in there and bits and bobs from that. But actually that money goes into my business while I'm trying to grow the actual business rather than directly to me. So so I'm supplementing it at the moment by doing some trucking work, which is great, because well, I paid about $3,000 to get my license in the first place, so might as well make it pay for itself. And I've been waiting for, geez, too flipping long now, to basically get a card that I need. It's called a CPC, driver CPC. It's a card that basically proves that I'm allowed to drive commercially for hire and reward. And because of lockdowns we've been having, I haven't been able to get one. Every time I've booked a date to go and do the test course, whatever you need to do it, boom, we've had a lockdown, and it's been forgotten about for the duration of that lockdown while they close all the centres. Absolutely bonkers. You'd think, especially during a lockdown, during this COVID crisis, truck drivers were really, really in demand, hugely in demand. So you'd think they'd be doing everything they could to make sure that there was new blood coming in, but no, unfortunately not. Anyway, yeah, so I've been out doing some of that. But I'm not working today. Well, at least not on the truck driving side of things. I've had to do a couple of things with my regular work as a forestry consultant. And today is the first day the pubs were open, so I dropped into a local around here to have a pint and read my book for a half an hour. And it got me thinking about funny story. So I'm reading a book at the moment called Nature Cure by an author. Oh, there we go. I've left it on the windowsill. Yeah, there's Nature Cure by Richard Mabey. This guy's I've been reading this guy's books for years, for many years, 25 years or more. He has been hugely influential to me because he's a nature writer over here in the UK, but he also suffers from depression, as many of us do. And so this book is really about his struggles with depression, and really how he goes about sort of addressing it, not so much addressing it, but coping with it by being out in nature, by appreciating nature. Obviously, I've only just started the book, so I can't tell you exactly what's in it, but it's one I've been meaning to get around to reading for quite a long while, because it's been out a few years now. I remember I did a video about this time last year, where I was sitting out underneath an oak tree smoking some Coniston cut plug and reading one of his books. So, yeah, I mean, you folks out there, if you haven't already heard of him, go and read some of his stuff. His name's Richard Mabey, Mabey. He's very well known over here in the UK in nature writing circles, probably not so much outside the country, but his generally his imagery and his ways of describing the countryside, the landscape, and his relationship with it are just they're just amazing. He's a beautiful, beautiful writer. But anyway, put me in mind because he wrote a song called the Night. He wrote a book about the Nightingale, and it put me in mind about an experience I had. Flipping heck, got to have been 20. Well, what we're in now, 2021, so it would have been around the mid 1990s, I guess. So we're going back a good 25 years, I'd say, something like that. Oh, get the housekeeping out of the way. I'm smoking in my Peterson 302 system. Jermaine's medium flake. Beautiful, beautiful springtime blend. Absolutely lovely. And I'm drinking something that's very suitably named an old timer from Walworth Brewery. Really good beer. But so about 25 years ago, I was living out in the woods with a group of friends. A place called Arundel. Well, not actually at Arundel, other side of the hill from Arundel. If any of you folks are from Sussex, you'll know it. Houghton. And more particularly a place called South Woods at Houghton, part of the Duke of Norfolk's estate. Well, we were squatting there, living in a collection of tents, benders, sort of structures. I think I probably spent a number of years there on and off, either throughout summers or occasionally throughout winters. It was quite I wouldn't say popular, but it was a well-known place where travelling people, hobos, woods bums, people like myself would go. And they'd end up staying there because there was a freshwater spring that bubbled out of the chalk and into the River Arun, where you could get fresh water. The walk over the hills to the town of Arundel to go and get shopping, things like that, food and supplies. It was a beautiful walk. It would take an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, something like that. So you'd go with your rucksack or something on your back and trundle over to the village of Arundel. Beautiful village. It's got a big castle, fairy tale castle. Go look it up. By the river. Really beautiful place. And the place that we lived, the little community that we had, and it was little, it was about 6 of us, maybe something like that. Well, one time there were others, various vagrants that would come and go. I think maybe at most there were probably around 12, all living in sort of little tucked away places in the woods, hidden away from your average dog walker or anything like that. But the place, South Woods, consisted of what we called bowls, the 3 bowls. So the first one, no, I'll start with the third. So the second and third bowls, as we called them, they were the remains of old chalk pits. So lime would be made there, historically speaking, so we're going back a couple of 100 years. Lime would have been dug out and quarried out of the ground there, and burnt in lime kilns, put on boats on the river and sent downriver to Littlehampton, where the port was, and the lime then would be distributed elsewhere. So there were a couple of lime kilns along the river there as well. But obviously, over a couple of hundred years, these overgrown, they'd become pretty wild, and they were in a kind of corner of the estate that was pretty much ignored and forgotten about by the estate management people. And it was pretty much left to its own devices. There was a public footpath or two running through it. You get dog walkers, you get weekend campers, things like that. They'd go and stay there for a couple of days, drink beers, and fucking leave litter and trash all over the place. And people like myself who lived there would pick it up, collect it up, maybe take it down to scrapyard if it was worth money, tin cans, things like that. Generally look after the place. But the first bowl, what we used to call the first bowl, was where a lot of the main quarrying would have taken place. So as a result, you had these huge, great cliffs of chalk. It's all chalk downland around that part of the country. So you'd have these huge chalk cliffs, and they kind of formed a bit of a crescent shape. And again, they'd become overgrown and everything else, but the chalk cliffs were still visible. And that was the main spot where most people, weekend campers, those kinds of people, and people who would just go there for a piss up to drink a bunch of beers, get wrecked, and have a weekend of being a dick, would go and stay. But it's also where the Boys Club and the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts and people like that would go. And they'd pitch up for a weekend or a week at a time. So, one particular night, my good buddy Ben and I we'd been down to one of the local pubs in the village of Houghton. So there was one at the village of Houghton, I think it was called the Green Dragon. And there was another one further down, near a very rural railway station at Amberley. The Bridge Inn, if I remember. We'd been to one of those pubs anyway. We'd had a skinful. So the two of us were walking back. And this place was brilliant because when the moon was out and the sky was clear, because all the local geology, I should say, sorry, was chalk, the path along the river would be lit up like a silver strand. You wouldn't need a torch or anything like that. You just, by the light of the moonlight, the little worn path, because the base was chalk, would just light up and it would just reflect. It was beautiful. And as we walked down the river there, we heard the Nightingales. And this is a place where at that time there were quite a number of nightingales. Now, nightingales are not a very common bird over here, but they're a very famous bird, a very well-known one, because they sing, because of their song. It's just this beautiful, liquid song that they sing, and they tend to haunt places along rivers where you've got maybe a bit of a cliff, a lot of vegetation growing over it, things like that. They love that sort of environment. So, of course, we were in a perfect place. And Ben and myself, we were following this silver strand of pathway down the river back to our camp. And we stood there for a while, just listened to the nightingales. And it's at this point that I should probably point out, I touched upon it in a video I did fairly recently. I've recently sort of been diagnosed as being on the autistic spectrum. So what people would have called Asperger's. Not serious by any means, It doesn't hugely affect my life or anything else like that, but it certainly explains what I'm about to say next. Because one of the things with people with Asperger's, or people who are on the autistic spectrum, is that quite often we say things that are inappropriate at bad times, or we can act inappropriately. It's because there's not this wall, there's not this kind of hello, darling, how you doing? There's not this kind of sort of switch that tells you, yeah, that's not the right thing to say, or that's not appropriate at this time. So Ben and I continued down the river, down along the Silver Path, down to the first bowl, where there was a group of Boy Scouts who were camping, and the Scoutmaster was there. And there are maybe half a dozen of these kids who are still awake, sort of sitting around their fire, when Ben and I came across them. And we obviously startled them appearing out of the dark, you know. So we said, oh, it's all right, don't worry, chill. We're not here to stab you in your sleep or anything. But after the Scoutmaster had composed himself and realised these couple of weird guys appearing out of the woods weren't there to sort of intimidate or do any harm, he sort of said, "Oh, what you doing?" And this little group of boys around him, maybe 8, 9 years old, something like that, and and we said, "Well, we've just been listening to the Nightingales down the river there. You want to just take a walk down the path about a quarter of a mile in that direction and just go and listen to the Nightingales. It'll be a really special thing." So this little boy, this little scout boy, pipes up, "What's a nightingale?" And me, being mildly autistic and having no filter at times, and thinking to myself, I'll relate to him on his level, very enthusiastic said, "It's a fucking rare bird." Those were my exact words to about an 8-year-old. Well, you can imagine the scout leader's face. I mean, he couldn't reprimand me for doing it. He didn't know who the hell we were. We could have been psychopaths or something. But he looked shocked, to say the least. And, well, we left them there by the fire with the advice to go and see if they could locate where the Nightingales were and just spend a half an hour or so listening to them. But I often think to myself, I wonder whether or not I traumatized that poor kid with my language. And it wasn't until quite a long time afterwards when I related this story to somebody else, they went, "You said what?" I went, "Well, yeah, I suppose it was a bit inappropriate, wasn't it?" Oh, well. But that was some good times. We had some great times there. Got a lot of stories from that place, that's for sure. And I'll probably pick one or two of those up another day. Oh, problem with owning a cat, you get cat hair in your pipe, don't you, darling? So yeah, 20 minutes. It's a bit of a long video, but I figured it was a bit of a funny story to relate. Hope you guys are all keeping well. Um, and seeing light at the end of the tunnel, wherever you are. Say hello, little baby. Right. That'll do for now. I'll catch you folks again soon. You take care.